The moment my wife announced her pregnancy to our family, I knew my marriage was over. She was crying happy tears, telling everyone how hard we had tried. I just sat there, holding my champagne, watching her lie to my face. I played along, I smiled, I even drank to the good news, but she had no idea that I was hiding a medical document in my safe that proved the baby couldn't possibly be mine. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, replaced by a thick, suffocating fog that only I could feel. My mother was clapping her hands together, thanking God for the blessing, her eyes wet with the kind of pure joy that only a prospective grandmother can feel. My father was slapping my back so hard it stung, congratulating me on finally carrying on the family name, telling me he knew I had it in me. And there was my wife, Alina, glowing under the crystal chandelier light, rubbing a stomach that she claimed held my child. It was a masterclass in deception. It was an Academy Award-winning performance. If I didn't know the absolute scientific truth, I would have believed her myself. She looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes, the same eyes I had woken up to for 5 years, the same eyes I had trusted with my deepest secrets, and she mouthed the words, "I love you." I forced the muscles in my face to move. I forced my lips to shape the words, "I love you too." But inside, my blood had turned to ice. My stomach was churning with a mixture of rage and nausea, because exactly 2 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday in November, I walked into a private urology clinic 3 towns over. I didn't tell Alina. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell a single living soul. I had a vasectomy. I did it because I carry a genetic marker for a debilitating neurological disease called Huntington's that ravaged my grandfather, turning a brilliant man into a shell of himself in his 50s. I swore on his grave that I would never, ever pass that curse onto an innocent child. I didn't want to burden Elena with the decision, so I made it for us. I take nothing for granted. I went back for my confirmation appointment 6 months later. I went back a year after that. The doctor looked at the sample and told me I was completely sterile. 0 count, azoospermia. There was no way, absolutely no way that I could father a child. So, as I sat at that dinner table, surrounded by the people I loved, I realized I was looking at a room full of suspects. Elena hadn't just cheated. She had been careless enough to get pregnant and cruel enough to try to pin it on me. She was planning to let me raise another man's child, to let me bond with it, to let me pay for it, all while knowing she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I spent the rest of that night in a fog of rage. I watched every man in the room. Was it our neighbor, Dave, who was always a little too friendly when he borrowed tools? Was it her coworker, Steve, who texted her late at night about work projects? Or was it the man sitting directly across from me, my best friend, Ryan? Ryan was my best man. He was the godfather to my dog. He was the guy I watched football with every Sunday. He was the brother I never had. And as I watched him that night, I noticed something. While everyone else was cheering, Ryan was quiet. He looked pale. He was drinking his scotch a little too quickly, his knuckles white around the glass. And when Elena looked at him, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, a tiny microscopic glance of shared panic. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't scream. I didn't pack a bag. As I lay in bed next to her, listening to her breathing, I realized that if I blew up now, she would spin the story. She would cry. She would say I was crazy. She would claim the vasectomy failed, which is medically possible, though rare. She would make herself the victim and me the villain who abandoned his pregnant wife. No. I needed to be absolutely certain. I needed irrefutable proof, and I needed to destroy her completely. If you want to hear how I planned the most brutal public revenge in the history of my town, how I turned a celebration into a massacre of truth, keep listening, because I didn't just walk away. I burned the bridge while they were still standing on it. For the next 4 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the doting, excited father-to-be. I went to the ultrasound appointments. I stood in the dark room, smelling the antiseptic air, holding her hand while we looked at the grainy image of another man's child on the monitor. I listened to the heartbeat. That was the hardest part, hearing the heartbeat of the betrayal. Thump, 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 thump. It sounded like a ticking clock counting down to the end of my life. "Elena, look at that," I would say, pointing to the screen, forcing tears into my eyes. "Our little miracle." She would squeeze my hand and say, "He has your nose, honey." It took every ounce of self-control not to vomit right there on the floor. The audacity to say the child had my nose when I knew for a fact my DNA was nowhere near it. By night, I was a detective. I became a ghost in my own house. I waited when she was in the shower, or asleep, or out running errands. I hired a digital forensics expert, a guy named Mike, who usually worked for corporate espionage cases. I paid him $3,000 to recover deleted messages from our shared iPad. It turns out iCloud backs up everything, even the sins you try to erase. It took 3 days to get the logs. I sat in my car, parked in an empty lot behind a grocery store, and opened the file. My gut instinct was right. It was Ryan. I read months of messages. They were graphic. They were intimate. They met at hotels during lunch breaks. They hooked up in my guest room while I was on business trips. I read texts where they made fun of me. Ryan called me clueless. Elena called me boring but safe. And then the panic messages started, dated around the time she found out she was pregnant. Ryan wrote, "What are we going to do? He'll know. The math doesn't work." Elena replied, "He won't know. He wants a baby so bad he won't question it. We just let him raise it. He's a good provider. You and I can still see each other. We just have to be careful." They weren't just betraying me. They were planning a lifetime of fraud. They were planning to use me as a wallet to raise their love child while they laughed behind my back. They were going to let me love a child that wasn't mine, knowing that one day the truth might come out and destroy that child's life too. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. I think I had run out of tears. I felt cold. I felt dangerous. I had the evidence. I had the medical records. Now I just needed a stage. Elena wanted a gender reveal party. She wanted it to be the event of the season. She wanted to invite everyone we knew. My family, her family, Ryan and his wife, Sarah. I told Elena, "Let me handle the reveal. You've been so tired. Let me plan the surprise. I want to do something special for you." She kissed me and said I was the best husband in the world. She had no idea she was kissing her executioner. I rented a beautiful venue overlooking the lake. I ordered the balloons, I ordered the expensive catering, and I prepared a special presentation. I spent hours editing it, making sure that timing was perfect. I also made some other arrangements. I moved half of our joint savings, the half that I had contributed, into a separate account she couldn't touch. I consulted with a shark of a divorce lawyer who assured me that in our state, proof of adultery would bar her from alimony. I prepared the papers. The day of the party was perfect. The sun was shining, the sky was a brilliant blue. 60 guests were gathered in the garden, drinking cocktails and making bets on whether it was a boy or a girl. My mother was wearing a Team Boy pin. Elena's mother was wearing Team Girl. Ryan was there. He walked in with his wife, Sarah. Sarah was a sweet woman, a teacher who had always been kind to us. She hugged Elena, she hugged me. Ryan clapped me on the back, his hand feeling like a burning brand on my shoulder. "So, big day, huh?" Ryan asked, avoiding my eyes. "You nervous?" I looked him dead in the eye and smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I said, "I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Ryan. You have no idea." He laughed nervously and walked away to get a beer. At 5 o'clock, I gathered everyone around the main stage. I had set up a massive projector screen. I tapped the microphone. The feedback screeched, silencing the crowd. Elena stood next to me, glowing in a white dress, holding her bump. She looked beautiful. It was a tragedy that something so beautiful could hide something so ugly. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice booming over the speakers. "We are here to celebrate a miracle. Elena keeps telling me this baby is a miracle. And you know what? She is absolutely right." I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "You see, usually babies are made in a very specific way," I continued, my voice calm and steady. "But this baby defied science. This baby defied biology." Elena looked at me, her brow furrowing in confusion. "David, what are you doing? Just pop the balloon." I ignored her. I unfolded the paper. "This is a medical report from Dr. Henderson dated 2 years ago," I announced, holding it up for the front row to see. "It confirms that I underwent a surgical vasectomy. It also confirms that as of my last checkup 2 weeks ago, I have a sperm count of 0. I am medically sterile. I cannot father a child." A hush fell over the crowd. It was so quiet you could hear the wind rustling the leaves in the trees. My mother dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the patio stones, the sound like a gunshot, but no one moved to clean it up.
Elena went pale. All the blood drained from her face. Her knees buckled, but she grabbed my arm to steady herself. "David, stop!" she hissed, her fingernails digging into my suit. "Your trunk! Stop this!" "I am stone cold sober, Elena," I said into the mic, pulling my arm away from her touch. "So, if I can't make a baby, that leaves us with a mystery. Who's the father?" I looked out at the crowd. I scanned the faces of our friends, our family. They were frozen in shock. I looked directly at Ryan. He was standing near the back, trying to edge away toward the exit. He looked like a trapped rat. "Ryan," I called out, "why don't you come up here? You're my best friend. Surely you want to help us solve this mystery." The crowd turned to look at him. Ryan froze. His wife, Sarah, looked at him. She looked at his terrified face. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at Elena. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She put her hand over her mouth. I pulled out a remote control. "I have one more surprise," I said. "I prepared a slideshow for the gender reveal." I pressed the button. The large projector screen behind me lit up. It wasn't pink or blue smoke. It was a screenshot, a text message from Elena to Ryan. It was projected 10 feet tall. It read, "He will never know. He's too stupid to figure it out. We can use his money to raise our baby. I love you, Ryan." The crowd gasped. It was a collective sound of horror and disbelief. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete. Elena screamed. She lunged for the remote, trying to tackle me. "No! Turn it off! David, turn it off!" I stepped back, dodging her easily. I pressed the button again. Another screenshot. A photo of them kissing in his car. A photo of them at a hotel. I pressed the button one last time. "It's a boy, by the way," I shouted over the commotion. "I found the results in your email. Congratulations, Ryan. You're having a son." Pandemonium broke out. Ryan's wife, Sarah, started screaming. She didn't just scream. She attacked. She turned on Ryan and started hitting him, pummeling his chest with her fists, sobbing hysterically. Ryan tried to defend himself, but he was surrounded by angry family members. Elena was sobbing on the floor of the stage, her white dress stained with the wine my mother had dropped. Her father was marching toward the stage with a face like thunder. He looked at me, then he looked at his daughter, and he spat on the ground next to her. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed through the speakers. I looked down at my wife, the woman I had promised to love forever. "I'll have my lawyer send the divorce papers on Monday," I said calmly. "You have 48 hours to move out of my house. And since I have proof of infidelity, don't expect a penny." I walked off the stage. I didn't look back. I walked through the stunned crowd. I walked past my crying mother, who reached out for me, but I couldn't stop. I walked past the ruin of my former best friend. I got in my car, turned the key, and drove away. That was 6 months ago. The divorce was finalized in record time. Elena got nothing. The prenuptial agreement held up, and the evidence was overwhelming. She is currently living with her parents, raising a baby that looks exactly like Ryan. I hear she tries to call me sometimes, but I changed my number. Ryan lost everything. Sarah divorced him and took the house and their kids. He lost his job because his boss was at the party and didn't appreciate the character of a man who sleeps with his best friend's wife. He is ruined. As for me, I'm doing just fine. I sold the house. Too many bad memories in those walls. I bought a boat. I'm currently docked in the Florida Keys, watching the sunset. People ask me if I regret doing it so publicly. They ask if it was too cruel. They say I should have just left quietly and spared the families the embarrassment. But betrayal is a fire. You can let it burn you alive, or you can use it to burn down the lies. I chose to burn down the lies. I chose to take my dignity back. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in my position, knowing what they planned to do to me, knowing they planned to make me raise a child that wasn't mine, would you have walked away quietly, or would you have thrown the party of the century like I did? Let me know in the comments below. This is David, signing off.
Watch who you trust.